Hello ladies and gentlemen, Capes here. This is the tank guide for normal and heroic Iron Maidens. Overall, tanking for this boss is quite simple. There's really just some static positioning for most of the fight for tanks. A little bit of awareness is necessary to position yourself in front of the line-based mechanics that the bosses will use to help out the raid. Overall tank damage is fairly low, except for the final phase, which we'll talk about later. And depending on your assignment, you may be going up to the Dreadnaught ship, in which case you will have a few extra duties to perform. So let's get started. So general tanking assignments. One tank will generally be on Enforcer Sorka, the other will be on Marak the Blooded. Admiral does not need to be tanked. He can be tanked. In fact, he's just one of those range mobs that shoots random people and stuff. You can move the Admiral somewhat, taunting him, moving him around a little bit. And you would generally want to tank the mobs together to get cleave damage on them. But for the most part, you'll just be tanking the other two mobs, ignoring the Admiral. As for positioning, you'll probably be using some similar positions to what you see here, tanking the bosses against one wall or other. As for tanking positions themselves, you will want to have a static sort of assigned spot that you can keep your back toward. This is to help handle the blood ritual ability, which is used very frequently in the fight. It's one of the main responsibilities for the targeted individual, some range player, as well as you as a tank. You need to be the first individual to be in line of that blood soak when it goes off. So for our positions here, you can see we have a green marker, which indicates the tank position with their backs toward the purple. So along that wall. And most of the time, if you're on the main platform, you'll basically be stationary soaking that with some slight movement side to side to get in line of that blood ritual effect if the person is not able to get to you in time. And you'll be able to see that when we talk about it later on. Now, throughout the fight, at set time intervals, the Dreadnaught ship will be boarded by one of these three bosses. The boss that it first chooses is the lowest health, then the second boss is the lowest health that hasn't gone up yet, and then the final one is just the remaining boss. They cannot go twice, so you can kind of see the pattern there. And there's the times that they actually go up. Now, for tanking, two out of three times that a boss goes on the Dreadnaught, a tank will need to go there as well. You can do that by running over to one of the 6 hooks on the outside of the platform, just clicking on it, and you'll be thrown up top. The Admiral phase, when the Admiral goes up, you do not need to go up there. You do not need to send a tank. But the other 2 times for both Sorka and Marak, basically the mobs that you tank yourself, you will need to have a tank go up there, either yourself or your tank partner. Now, if you're down below, down on the main platform here, while a Dreadnaught phase is active, you will have to dodge a series of bombardment bombs, as you see here. And doing so is not too complicated, so I'm going to just include the animation and overview that I have in the main raid guide here to describe that. But if you don't need it, you can just skip ahead a few minutes to go past it. So the first thing to understand about the bombs is that they essentially have 3 states that they pass through over time. So at first, a bomb will be marked where it's going to land with a large red circle, as you see here. After that initial hit happens, it will do damage to anyone that's there, knock them back, and then it will be converted into just a stationary bomb that is not about to explode there. So there you can see that just the gray circle is just our bomb that has landed there. And then the final of the third state is this bomb will be red and it's going to explode. And of course, when it explodes, it does big damage to anyone that's there. So of these 3 states, each bomb will pass through them in order every time. In addition to this, the bombs having 3 states, you have 2 different patterns or sets of bombs, the alpha and the omega. So in total, there are 6 states that will occur during the bombardments, but at any given time, each of the 2 different patterns of bombs will be activating 2 different states. So you need to use this knowledge to then go from positions of the alpha to the omega, back to the alpha, back to the omega, and kind of repeat this process. Now the actual pattern that you'll see bombs in and how you dodge them is pretty simple. You'll initially get a small number of alpha bombs. So we'll just, in our part of the room that we're examining, here's just one alpha bomb that's going to land there. There's the red circle. And meanwhile, maybe you're off to the right slightly. So you want to be fairly close to where an alpha is landing for your pattern that you're going to do. Shortly after the first state, so after the bomb lands, you'll then see the bomb in that position. Explosion has gone off. So there's the alpha bomb, just to the left. Meanwhile, you will have a number of the omega bombs coming out, and this is the big number of bombs in this set, this bombardment. So you'll probably have one here, and here, and here, and let's just imagine they're all around, and they continue out, So right now, the only safe position for you to not get hit by the initial landing explosion of all of these omega bombs is on top of the alpha bomb, which is a safe position because the initial hit already landed, so it's in its second state. So you want to move to the left here. So let's just do that. Actually, I have to drag that. There we go. All right, so now you are basically hanging out with this alpha bomb while the initial hits happen with all the omegas. And then, of course, the actual omega bombs will land and the explosions will go off. And then the actual alpha bomb that you're on will start to explode. It will turn red. So then at this point, you need to move back to where you started, back toward now on top of an omega bomb somewhere. So we'll just go back to this right one where we started. And then the final step, of course, is the alpha bomb will explode. It will be gone completely. Your final move will be back here as all of the omega bombs are now exploding. And then they will all explode. And then the process will repeat. So then at some point you'll see 1 or 2 circles to indicate the initial alphas, and the whole thing just goes over once again. Now, if you were tanking up on the Dreadnaught for the Enforcer Sorka Dreadnaught phase, you essentially will have one big mob to pick up in the center, and then a series of smaller mobs that will continue to spawn. These lesser mobs, you can try to get aggro on them, but generally they will be fixated on random players that are with you on the boat. The basic goal here is to quickly kill all the little mobs so they don't stack up debuffs on everyone else. But generally speaking, the phase will end. You'll be able to exit the boat when you kill the main mini-boss there in the middle. So that's the overall goal. The footage that you're seeing here is from one of the very first attempts on this, so I didn't have any idea what's going on. But that's the basic idea. Once you kill one of the mini-bosses in the Dreadnaught, you can click on one of the rotating bombs near the cabin there and come back to the main platform. Now, Marak the Blooded, his Dreadnaught phase is just one single mini-boss, and the basic idea here is to constantly be moving and backpedaling. The boss will frequently drop little pools of blood underneath everyone's location, and after a few seconds, these will activate and start doing very heavy damage every second if you're standing there. So as a tank, you simply want to start backpedaling once you get him on the initial entrance side of the room. So you want to taunt him from range and pull him over there. And then you just start backpedaling around the outside, as you see here, our tank's doing. Melee DPS that are with you will probably be stacked with you in front. And so if you just keep moving backwards, you can do it pretty fast. You may even consider turning off your run movements speed, if you know how to do that. And you can just backpedal constantly at that speed, essentially. But just make sure you remember to turn it back on when he dies. So there's no real reason to go through and talk about every ability that you'll see on the platform because many of them just aren't relevant for tanks. I'll just talk about the ones that you can impact or might affect you. So the first one is Penetrating Shot. This is used by Admiral Garan anytime after he gains 30 energy, or Iron Fury as it's called. At that point he gains the ability to use Penetrating Shot, and this will target a random ranged player, and after a few seconds you'll see a line that goes toward them, and after a few seconds he will fire and split the damage that he's going to do to that person with anyone within that line. So as a tank, you'll generally be in melee range if you're down here, of course. So you can take it upon yourself to step in front of that line with everyone else and help soak the damage. The exception to this rule is if you are dealing with Blood Ritual off to the other side or whatever. You obviously don't want to miss Blood Ritual just to get in Penetrating Shot. But that will depend a little bit on your raid strategy and positioning. But otherwise, there's no downside to tanks helping out with Penetrating Shot soaking. So the other main abilities you need to look out for are from Marak the Blooded. The first one is Blood Ritual, as I mentioned a few times. The key with this one is that it requires proper positioning for both the afflicted player and you as a tank, and it's active through the entire fight. So you're going to have to deal with it a lot. Generally, the plan will be for the afflicted player, a targeted ranged player, to run behind you at the tank position. So again, for our setup, that person's running between green and purple with the tank stacked on green. Then when the Blood Ritual goes off, it will deal damage to anyone in a cone, but it deals more damage to the first person hit. So that's why it's important that tanks are the closest players to the boss when that ability goes off. And then it will deal cone damage to anyone behind you, so maybe an off tank or the person that's afflicted, of course, but that should be it. So it's pretty simple to deal with, but the other thing you may need to be watching for is if somebody is afflicted and maybe they can't get into the assigned position in time, maybe they were really far away for some other reason, you may then have to rotate your position around the boss to make sure you are standing on that Blood Ritual line so that you can soak it for them. So by far the most dangerous ability in the entire fight for tanks is when Marak gains 100 energy, basically in the last phase, and that's Sanguine Strikes. He will use this on his current tank target, of course, and it does very heavy damage to you, but more importantly, perhaps, it's similar to the Acid Torrent ability from Orgorger, in that it deals damage to the raid, and that damage dealt is reduced the less damage that you as a tank take. So it's in your interest for both yourself and, of course, the raid as a whole to use cooldowns when this ability is about to hit you. And it hits particularly hard in the last phase because when the bosses all have 100 Fury, or basically when they're in the last phase usually, they will be gaining stacks of Iron Will, and this increases their damage dealt by 10% every 20 seconds in its stacks. So this means that depending on how quickly your raid kills Marak at that point, this ability could be hitting extremely hard. So just be aware of that, and if you're tanking this boss, make sure you save your cooldowns, and if you're not tanking him in the last phase, try to save your cooldowns for when you do tank him, because usually you want to rotate tank assignments in that last phase for that reason. So I believe that should about do it for the tank guide for Normal and Heroic Iron Maidens. Overall, it's pretty simple to tank, particularly if you're not going up in the Dreadnaught. It's mostly just standing still, watching for a Blood Ritual, maybe Penetrating Shot, and then saving your cooldowns for those big burst damage moments during the last phase. As always, good luck, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, shiver me timbers. What am I doing?